Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar said recently that border disputes between India and China will continue to impact relations between the two nations on different fronts like trade and economy. Now, this is not the first time he said it. This is in fact the government of India's stated position on the boundary dispute. We know of the Galwan clash where 20 Indian soldiers were killed. China has not formally revealed how many of its soldiers died in the clash. There have been several other such operations all along the boundary, and this standoff is entering its 5th year this year. The fact that the LAC remains tense on hair trigger alert is cause for concern. And joining me to discuss this today on Army Day, the 76th Army Day, are Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Major General Jagatbir Singh, and my colleague Deepak Bhadana. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you, Sandeep, for inviting me.
General Sharma, I want to start by asking you, firstly, congratulations, it's the 76th Army Day today. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you. Congratulations to you also and to the entire nation.
Who stand guard on those frozen frontiers while we are sitting here in our air-conditioned and heated rooms in Delhi. We can only continue to thank the Indian Army for what it's doing, standing guard on two fronts as we speak. But sir, now India is the only country, the only large democracy that stayed out of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's linked the border dispute to the normalization of relations with China, and it's indeed the only major country that's physically facing off against China. Now, what are the concerns, what are the chances that this could spill out into a full-scale war?
Yeah, so Sandeep, as it stands here, see, firstly, you can't predict anything. Wars are unpredictable. Wars, as they continue, are more messy and more unpredictable.
Right.
So whether the war will happen or not happen is a separate issue altogether.
Yeah.
Then we have to be prepared for it.
Right.
But first issue is China prepared for a war today?
Right.
So that is a issue of grave concern for us to understand the Chinese side. And let me put my head into the news and say it doesn't seem that Chinese are prepared presently for a war.
Right.
And they are in a place to coerce us militarily in a manner that they have been doing for last 4 years after 2020, and thereafter in the infrastructure building and positioning of forces and habitat being constructed and everything else that they've done on Tibet and Xinjiang. They are causing immense amount of pressure on us by military coercion. So probably a war of a kind that we think about as a conventional war may not be on the cards immediately.
Right. That's an interesting point that you made. So, the fact that military coercion is what really the standoff was all about. And General Jagatbir, I want to ask you this. The fact that, with Pakistan, we clearly have an escalation ladder, and we've the political leadership seems to have understood that not every terror attack warrants a conventional military response, or not every cross-border retaliation will lead to a nuclear war. What would be the escalation ladder vis-a-vis China? Is that fairly understood by both sides? As General Sharma was mentioning, the fact that this is coercion, military coercion, it is not a threat of an invasion, what the PLA did 4 years back. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. General Sharma has commanded 14 Corps, which was very closely involved with guarding the LAC against China in the northern areas of Ladakh and eastern Ladakh. So what he says has a lot of value in exactly what he said. But more than that, I'd like to say that we are facing a collusive threat, both from China and from Pakistan together in this area. So that is something that we have to look at. Now, each one will try to tackle you in a different manner, and how you escalate and retaliate or take steps against that also differs in both cases. But in far as China is concerned, we have not seen any physical firing of any weapons. And the last time I think that happened was in 1967 in Nathula. So there are a certain amount of treaties in place. So you've seen that the escalation has been maintained below a certain threshold level. But what we saw in Galwan was absolute barbarism, pushing, shoving, hitting. So that is there. So these are things that you have to understand. And what General Sharma very rightly said, they force you to, they are forcing us to spend more and more on our defense. They are forcing us to look towards that side, forcing us to increase our deployments against that. And that has an effect on our deployment versus Pakistan.
Right.
So it's a game that they're both playing together.
Right, a game that they're both playing together. Interesting. And Deepak, I mean, since you've been covering conflict, especially these three wars that are on nearly simultaneously over the last 2-3 years, you have Russia, Ukraine, that's been it's entering a third year now. Yeah, you have Israel and Hamas, and now you have the Houthis that have activated a third front. What do you think are the chances that you could see a limited skirmish? You could probably ask our panelists that.
Yes, and this question goes to both of them, in fact. So what are the possibilities of a localized area conflict? China has made, a number of pinpricks. The most famous was that incident that was widely captured on video and was viral on Twitter.
Yes.
In somewhere on the eastern part of our borders, in Arunachal, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think some provocations may come every now and then. I wanted to understand what is the largest scope of conflict that we are seeing within these parameters?
General Sharma, Deepak has this question for you, if you'd like to take that.
Yeah, so the point is that there is a application of force required for doing a task. If we, as you mentioned, learn from Ukraine war, the quantum of force applied by the Russians initially was so less in numbers, so shallow, and the points of contacts were such large, over 2,000 kilometers, that they failed initially.
Right.
Then they concentrated the application of force to a narrower area, to 3 to 4 points between Donbass and Kherson, and they were able to succeed here.
Yeah.
Now, the Chinese border is 4,000 kilometers wide, 3,488 we say.
Right.
The quantum of force that they brought into 2020 was not having a meaning of doing something substantial. It was minuscule force. They could have come to say one area DBO, but the border is very large. Other areas could have been exploited by us.
Yes.
Even now, the quantum of force that they have applied themselves across the northern borders is not substantial enough to do anything great on the borders.
Okay.
And then we have also built-in acclimatized reserves, which will take advantage of gaps which will be created here. So the situation doesn't warrant that kind of war that we talk about, Hakikat type of war, where that war is not in the cards. But a war of a technological kind, missiles, rockets, space, cyber, or name a thing, that war is absolutely on the cards at any time. Yeah.
Right. So you won't see you won't see infantry assaults, is what you're saying, of the kind that we witnessed in '62, and indeed what Russia has been doing to Ukraine in the last couple of years. But General Sharma, what are the warning signs of something like that? I mean, how can you tell that the PLA is actually planning something? What were the where can you say that this is the line that they will cross now? And there will be a kind of war of the kind that you were mentioning, say using rocket forces or cyber attacks.
So you see, cyber attacks are on. Even now, last year, if you see 2019, they had a website called Hello, which bombarded before the election took place an anti-BJP type campaign.
Right.
I would say if you're doing electoral manipulation against people of India, that's war. They tried the same thing in Taiwan. I would say this is war. Public didn't react to it as a separate issue altogether.
Yes.
Or the kind of coercion that they can carry out on maritime frontiers. Say, for example, all these 4,000, 5,000 odd flotilla of shipping vessels, fishing vessels all over the place.
Right.
So that is a kind of coercion they can do it.
Yeah.
If they want to mean business, say in the Arunachal Pradesh area or the central belt, they have to build up south of Sangpo.
Right.
That is what we call Brahmaputra on own side.
Right.
If they build up across the river, which is a deep gorge, and build up on own side in substantial quantum of force, and that would be the first indication that they mean business.
Right.
And that is not easily on the cards.
Okay, that's interesting. And the point that you made, General Sharma, I'm going to ask this to General Jagatbir as well. Taiwan. Now, the Taiwanese have just elected a president who's not pro unification with China. In fact, he's pretty anti-China, and the Chinese are not very happy about it. Now, given the fact that you have the United States that's standing behind Taiwan, it's ambiguous about whether it's going to interfere or not militarily. But what are the chances that, Taiwan, given what they're looking at on their eastern front, they could kind of turn towards India and, so-called teach India a lesson like they did in 1962? What are the chances of that distracting the world from, picking on another country? How easily achievable is that?
Well, I don't think that is that easily achievable as it's theoretically possible. Practically, I don't think that possibility exists because we're too far apart.
Right.
And as far as China and Taiwan is concerned, I think the Chinese president describes, that the historical inevitability of Taiwan being part of China, whereas the Taiwanese democracy has demonstrated that they are treading a different path.
Right.
So I mean, they are two extremes of these views entirely. Whereas the border dispute with India is different to their claims over Taiwan. So that we should recognize. Now, the issue with India has always been simmering right from the beginning, and there have been peaks. There have been times when the border relations have been better with this peace and tranquility. But lately, the last 5 years, you've seen there has been tension in the area. There have been deployments that have been carried out by both sides.
Right.
And certain amount of disengagement has taken place. But to what extent the de-escalation has taken place, and there has been no substantial de-induction of troops that has taken place on our side. So, I mean, this is something that is easily understood. And like General Rakesh Sharma very clearly brought out, for them to come in and make some major gains towards India, they have to build up substantially against India. I think with Taiwan, they're going to be more on the maritime issue in that South China Sea, as far as I see it, and they'll keep trying to push their red lines against Taiwan. That's what I feel now.
Right. So,
yes, I think.
General Sharma, this now, I mean, the other hot potato, the elephant in the room is the Maldives. Now, the Maldivian president has just come back after 5 days in China, and he's come back with some kind of assurances that China would be able to counterbalance India in the Indian Ocean. How much of a realistic chance does his strategy have of, diversifying away from India? They're trying to make medical, they're giving incentives for Maldivians to travel to other countries for medical treatment and, move away from India. How realistic is that? And will China be able to fill the gap? Will a distant China be able to fill the gap that proximate India has been doing for the last many decades?
So, Sandeep, there are many issues here. One is that China card is being played not by Maldives alone, by all our neighbors.
Yeah.
Every kind of weapon system that Bangladesh is buying is the second largest purchaser of weapons from China.
Yes.
From aircraft to tanks to the ports being built, the latest port, the BNS Sheikh Hasina, which has got 6 submarine bay and all. They don't have submarines as yet.
Right.
But all this is built by the Chinese. Similarly, in Nepal, they're gone a very big way. They've got some things going on with Bhutan. Things are not very clear. So Maldives is one more issue in this whole game of the Chinese to take on South Asia. I'm not talking about string of pearls, leave that story apart, but they are in a big way to come and establish themselves into the Indian Ocean region. And Maldives is one more cake that they wish to take it. Now, having said that, there is a government which has come out in Maldives which is inimical to us. But let me state it here that, of course, he is being nasty. But the strength of a diplomacy rests in your working with inimical governments.
Yes.
If you have goody-goody governments and you work with goody-goody government, that's not diplomacy. That's easy thing. But haven't you covered the visit of Musharraf to India and the difficult time we had with Musharraf?
Yes.
Aren't we today dealing with Taliban? We are dealing with the Myanmar junta, which is in trouble nowadays. We also dealt with Khalida Zia. We dealt with Prime Minister Oli. So this is one more part of diplomacy. We just cannot allow countries to go away like this just because the gentleman who's come to chair is inimical to us. The diplomacy has to work through this system which been created out.
Absolutely, that's an interesting point you should mention. That fact that diplomacy has to work through, good weather, bad weather, turbulence. General Jagatbir, what's the prognosis with Maldives? Do you think we just have to wait it out and hope for a pro-India regime to come back to power, because there seems to be a revolving door in the Maldives. You know, it's like 5 years of an anti-India government followed by 5 years of a pro-India government, and this circle continues. Is there any way to build relations that are lasting with the people of Maldives so that we kind of bypass this thing of hostile governments?
I think General Rakesh Sharma summed it up beautifully when he said that, you know, you have to deal with nations and not with individual governments.
Yeah.
And irrespective of the character of the individual government, whether it's pro-you or anti-you or hostile to you, I won't say anti, to a degree, you have to deal with a country, you have to deal with a nation. And that's where the depth of our relationship with the Maldives are.
Right.
We've had great amount of relationships. We've had training. We provided them a huge amount of disaster relief when required. We also responded in 1983, I think it was then, in 1988, November 1988, in Operation Cactus, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that time the para brigade was moved there. So I mean, these are part of the para brigade. So I mean, these are things that are there. And that was a joint tri-service operation. The Army, Navy, and the Air Force was involved.
Right.
So today they've asked us to remove our people who are there, the military presence.
Yes, by the 15th of March. There's a deadline that's been given. Yes.
Yeah, that is the deadline. So I think ultimately, even if we remove them or this thing, our relations will still be there.
Right.
And as General Sharma has very rightly brought out, you know, slowly China is exerting itself all around you. So we can say we're a land-based country, but actually our land, we can't. Our land borders are Pakistan, China, Nepal, we can enter.
Yeah.
After that, Bhutan, we can enter. Myanmar, again, you have problems. And Bangladesh. I mean, this is it. So we are surrounded by these people. And China is now making inroads to get people who are in the maritime area, again, pro-China. So, I mean, that's to be expected only.
Right.
So we have to counter that. We have to be prepared.
Afraid we are totally out of time there. Thank you so much, General Jagatbir and General Rakesh Sharma, for that 360-degree view of the problems that confront India. It's Army Day today, and we are talking about all those major threats. The primary one, of course, being the PLA and the hidden dragon on our borders. In fact, not so hidden, Deepak. And of course, Maldives and the arc of instability around India. But we'll keep monitoring this in our subsequent segments. Air travel is been in the news of late, but for all the wrong reasons. Now, there have been a spate of passenger-related rage incidents in the last couple of days. 2 days back, passengers were locked up in an aero bridge in Mumbai. Yesterday, a passenger assaulted a pilot on an Indigo aircraft. There's been cancellations because of fog, chaos at Delhi airport. Now, joining me to discuss this are Mr. Jitendra Bhargav, former Executive Director, Air India, Captain Panesar, formerly with Indian Airlines, Captain Kishore Chinta, and my colleague Ajit Vijay Kumar. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. Mr. Bhargav,
Thank you.
Delhi airport is the country's largest, but you know, every winter we have the same issues without any doubt whatsoever. The flight diversions, delays on the ground, angry passengers, pilots being assaulted. What explains all of this? Was this not all planned before when Delhi airport was being redeveloped a decade ago?
You know, it is not Delhi airport per se. It's because it's the geographical situation in the north, where the winter sets in and the fog is there. And every year it happens. You're pretty right on it. But the reality is that you really can't wish it away and say, this year we will not have any disruption in flights during the fog period. It happens. You can only take precautions to the extent you can. We all know that the fog has been very intense this time. The visibility has been very poor. And of course, you can fault DGCA, you can fault the airport, you can fault the airlines. Why haven't they taken proactive measures? The reality is, one thing that's being spoken about pretty loosely is, and my colleagues will certainly be more, they're more expert because having been pilots themselves in speaking about it, the Cat 3 pilots, why are they not being deployed by the airlines? I have made it abundantly clear on repeated occasions that airlines have no incentive to disrupt their flight schedule. If they can roster a Cat 3 trained pilot on an aircraft, they will do it. but there are operational constraints.
Right.
You don't keep a Cat 3 trained pilots ready for the fog to sit in. They are rostered for flights on a weekly basis and they're given. Now you can't get everything, and once the disruption takes place, it has a cascading effect.
Right.
And that is what we are witnessing. And when, what we also need to do is to make our passengers aware of the operational constraints. They believe that airlines should be able to cater to everything during the fog period. They simply cannot. And yesterday's incident you made mention of, where a passenger, unruly rogue passenger, went and slapped the pilots.
Assaulted the pilots.
You have to be constrained. Can an airline compromise safety? If the flight cannot be operated, it cannot be operated. Just go by what the pilots are doing. He's the pilot in command. He's taking the final call on it.
Right.
And he will fly you. After all, airlines are there to serve you, to fly you from one point to another. And they are doing their best.
Right.
And airlines are losing. They're the biggest losers. When the flight gets diverted or gets delayed, the schedule goes for a toss. There are financial losses, image losses, inconvenience to passengers, and it goes across all airlines. That's the only redeeming part, that nobody can say this particular airline impacted or affected adversely my trip, and the other airline wouldn't have. It's across the board.
It's across the board, and in fact, Captain Panesh sir, I want to ask you that these incidents keep happening without fail every year, and as Mr. Bhargav mentioned, it seems to be more an issue of coping with them, handling it, right? Airlines are unable to handle this kind of situation when it comes up. Do you think there needs to be more sensitization for airlines in this aspect, or is it better rostering? What are your thoughts on this?
Let me tell you at the outset, a pilot is trained to fly the aircraft safely for the safety of passenger, crew and the aircraft.
Right.
And he's been given the weather minima in this type of visibility he can take off or land. Now, in the interest of safety, he sees the weather and all that. Unless the weather improves, he's not allowed to take off.
Yeah.
Because he's concerned about the safety of passengers and crew. It's a sad incident that this person who has come and fought with the pilot, he should have been handed over to the police immediately.
Right, which he was,
I believe. You can't even slap anybody on the roadside in an argument also.
Right, especially not a pilot.
The airline should have immediately handed over. It's a criminal action.
Yes.
You can't hit him. He is interested in the safety of not him, but all passengers on board the aircraft. He has responsibility of taking the flight from A to B, safe conditions and all that. Why doesn't this passenger realize? In the past, the people have been handed over to the police.
Yes.
Even the one member of parliament was also handed over to the police when he misbehaved on board the flight.
Right.
So it is important for the airline and the security at the airport to catch hold of these people immediately.
No, there can be no defense for this kind of behavior. Unruly behavior needs to be punished by the police, especially when you're assaulting a pilot. And Ajit, this point that there have been flights that have been waiting for 12 hours and 14 hours, and not enough communication was made to the passengers, perhaps. It wasn't handled as well as it should be. Do you think there's an issue there of sensitizing airlines? That
of course, what happens is that, as we all know, that fog is not, fog comes unannounced.
Right.
But then when you have a long range kind of prediction that something like this may happen,
that you're looking at a week of prolonged fog.
Correct. So for that, the airlines should certainly inform the passengers in advance in a manner where they can prevent this chaos. What is now happening is that we even had an instance where people were waiting on the aero bridge for an hour or more.
It's unheard of. I mean,
unheard of.
Why would you? 2 hours on an aero bridge?
Yeah, and in terms of the whole thing about Cat 3 and Cat 3B also, we have to also understand one thing, that this happens primarily at Delhi airport, because it's the busiest hub, and it happens for 10 or 15 days a month in one full calendar year.
Yes.
Now, for an airline to invest that much of money to train everyone is, I think, is not something that makes sense in terms of cost-benefit analysis. That's also the case, but as Mr. Bhargava said, that it's also a factor of rostering.
Yes.
Right. So if you have a roster for a week, and the pilot who is trained for Cat 3B is somewhere in Chennai, for example, and suddenly one fine morning you feel that he's needed in Delhi, something that it can't work like that.
Right.
So I think the most important thing is that the passengers should also be sensitive to the fact that this may happen, because what happened last week in America, where due to this this winter storm, there were 2,700 flights cancelled. 2,700 flights cancelled in America, and there was not much of this kind of an social media halla as it happens in India. So one has to also understand that weather is not in our control, but most importantly, the airlines have the biggest role to play here.
Right, that's an interesting point. And Captain Kishore, you've been flying into Delhi airport for the last 17 years. Is this a problem, as Ajit was saying, that is this a problem that the airlines can quite easily handle, with greater, sensitization, perhaps, not ensuring that all the passengers kind of crowd in when you know that it's a zero visibility and no chance of a flight taking off?
Sandeep, I fully agree with that. The airline, more than the crew, is the only people who can sensitize this with the passengers.
Right.
Okay. There are no rules about boarding per se.
Right.
The decision to board rests with the PIC in most airlines.
Yes.
Okay. But in low-cost carriers, the operational control center eventually takes the call based on multiple inputs from various data sources like weather, the other aspects of congestion at arrival or departures, the position of the connecting passengers, and various other information. So the PIC cannot handle all this information at sitting in the aircraft. So eventually the OCC is the one taking the call, and they get over exuberant in the interest of achieving OTPs.
Yes.
And in the zeal for that, start pushing for boarding, over anticipating.
Right.
And, especially low-cost carriers refuse to pay for aerobridge access.
Yes.
They eventually, if you do the, statistics, you'll see that low-cost carriers prefer, boarding step-ladder process where they use ground transportation of their own.
Right.
That's a huge logistical coordination required for passengers to be hoarded into buses 45 minutes prior, taken to the aircraft, pushed into the aircraft, then rotating those ground transport. That's where the cookie starts crumbling. It's like a very fine balancing act.
Yes.
And as far as Delhi airport is concerned, last year, Airport Authority actually came out with a specific circular for all the ATCOs, especially about fog delays, based on various statistics. When low visibility procedures are in progress, there is going to be slow taxi, increased runway occupancy time, increased separation between arrivals and departures.
Right.
All these have a cascading effect.
Yes.
So they decided that there is something called a target off-block time, which the airline is supposed to fill in and give to the departure control.
Right.
And based on which the ATC, based on the congestions and all, will give you a target startup time.
Yes.
That is supposed to be what is to be used by the airline to start their boarding process.
Right.
Which in real world scenario would work well.
Right.
But, we have 3 Cat 3 runways in Delhi.
Yes.
28, 29 left, and 11 right. These are the only 3 runways which are Cat 3 compliant.
Right.
Not, people keep saying we have 4 runways.
Yes.
All should be Cat 3 compliant. It's not possible.
Right.
So out of these 3 runways, we have only 2 right now. It is 29 left and 11 right.
Right.
And at peak hours, 0927 and the 29 left and 11 right, the max arrival departures which Delhi airport can handle by the book based on statistics is 73.
Right.
So you're talking about an average of 35 to 40 arrivals and departures. So the solutions per se, which the airlines in coordination with the airport controller would be that mandate that Cat 3 be compliance for crew, especially for packets. There are packets which are made as per the ATC circular. That packet A, Indigo has 10 departures, so-and-so airline has so-and-so departures. So from 0430 in the morning till 0700, packet A. So airlines are allotted these packets. It's all there in writing.
Yeah.
But in real world scenario, nobody follows it.
Because of OTP, everyone's chasing the OTP thing.
Yes.
Right.
So there is a calculated takeoff time, and if outside India, you go to Europe and all, you cannot ask for departure clearance more than 15 minutes prior to your calculated takeoff time. Whereas here, for example, yesterday, 130 aircraft were on delivery frequency asking for departure clearance.
Right.
It's unheard of.
Right.
It is the patience of these ATC controllers that they handle this,
Yeah.
whereas pilots to be also sensitized that they need to stick to their CTOT and follow it strictly, whether it's on CPDLC or on departure delivery clearance. They have to stick to it. Only then can there be some form of method to the madness to control this. Well, one of the solutions would be like JFK or Chicago or Paris. They handle is reduce arrival and departures when there is a prediction of fog delays.
Yes.
They reduce it by 10%.
You immediately
15%,
start cancelling flights.
So the cascading effect is reduced. That is something which we need to strictly enforce.
In fact, Mr. Bhargav, the Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Sindhya, has asked for the 4th Cat 3 runway to be operationalized. But he's also said that the DGCA will issue an SOP for airlines on better communication and facilitation of passengers to minimize discomfort. Is this SOP not already there? I mean, do airlines merely have to be told this is what you need to do in case of a cancellation, or are you merely re-emphasizing what's already there?
No, they do. They certainly have a SOP, but the reality is
it's never followed, as Captain Kishore said.
Flight diversion and other things.
Yeah.
There are other things being attended to, and this becomes a casualty.
Right.
I'll just give an instance. One of the co-panelists made a mention of the 2,700 flights being cancelled in US last week because of the snowstorm. FAA, the counterpart of DGCA, issued a public statement and in social media advising passengers to contact the airport and the airline to know whether the flight is operating or not.
Right.
Now, have we ever seen a proactive approach by DGCA in India?
No.
DGCA relishes issuing show-cause notices and finding the airlines rather than playing a proactive role where it needs to do it.
Right.
Now, second question is, while there's no denying that Delhi airport is Cat 3 compliant, more runways are available to it, but the fact is it is not just the airport being Cat 3 compliant, the aircraft has to be Cat 3 compliant, the pilots have to be Cat 3 compliant.
Absolutely.
And why do we not have adequate number of Cat 3 compliant? Well, that's the question we need to be asking. And the answer to it is that we added 133 new aircraft in the year 2023.
Right.
Which means about 1,000 pilots.
Right.
1,000 plus pilots requirement for them. Can the airlines ground the pilots and put them for Cat 3 training, upsetting their normal schedule? And if they do so, the fares will go up. There'll be chaos of a different kind.
Right.
So, the operational limitations have to be understood.
Right.
This is a period that has gone through it. Nothing would be better than if you have adequate number of Cat 3 pilots. But as one co-pilot very rightly said, you're talking of 10, 12 days in a year. But can you afford it? We are in a growth mode. Number of aircraft are being added. It's phenomenal. So when you look at all these kind of a thing, the passenger sensitivity must come. DGCA should be proactive. And the discipline should be across the board, whether it is airport, whether it's passengers, whether it's airlines. Once you've been allocated a certain slot, adhere to it. Try and minimize chaos if you cannot eliminate chaos altogether. That
Absolutely.
The message
very important points, Mr. Bhargav. And I want to ask Captain Panesar this point that you made, that a more responsive, more proactive DGCA that actually, reaches out to passengers. I mean, after all, what is the DGCA doing if it's not going to handle emergency like this? Why should it have to pass the buck to, say, airlines or, even individual pilots? What do you think the DGCA should be doing in situations like this? Given the fact that every year that you're going to have 10, 12, 14 days of fog disruptions, and with the kind of climate change that we are seeing, these could happen at greater intensity and, practically at no notice. Captain Panesar, your thoughts on this?
See, the DGCA is a primary regulatory body, and they hold meetings with the airline and they decide about the weather minima conditions for the pilots for takeoff and landing.
Right.
And all pilots, everybody has to abide by those rules. Now, there are certain pilots who trade for category 3 islands where the visibility is very poor and cloud base is also low. In that case, the pilots have to be given training on the simulator and actual flying conditions. And after it's a very tedious process of training and all that. And the weather is not bad all over all the stations. So pilot has to do actual takeoff and landing in such a category 3 condition. And the airline once DGCA lays down the minima, no pilot is supposed to violate those minima in the test of the safety of aircraft and passengers.
Right.
See, there are minima laid down for the pilot, and even when you go to take off point, if the visibility goes below the minima, he is not supposed to take off, he is supposed to come back. Because just in case he takes off and engine fails, he will not be able to land back in that poor visibility. So all these minima are laid down by DGCA, taking into consideration all the factors, training of pilots, type of pilots, and the actual weather condition at the place of departure and all that. Now, the pilot it's better to be late than never. Pilot has to take consideration of the safety of passenger and aircraft.
Right.
And all these minima, no pilot can violate these minima laid down by the regulatory body, that is DGCA, in consideration with the airline and the airport authority, ATC. Sometimes even their ILS systems are also not working.
Yes.
So all these conditions have to be told to the pilot, and pilot, considering all the conditions of ATC, type of wireless available, he will have to decide within the rule book that whether he can take off or land or not.
Right. So
these conditions are laid down for the safety of passengers only.
Right.
And no pilot will intentionally cancel the flight and all that when he is entitled to take off.
Right. Ajit, greater responsibility on the part of DGCA, what should they be doing? I mean, the Civil Aviation Minister has kind of put the ball into the airlines court, but do you think that the DGCA should be more proactive in doing what they did? Especially handling situations like this.
Of course, you know, the role of DGCA should not be only of a cop.
Right.
Right, that you are there to kind of look at the flaws.
Yes.
But then you should, they should kind of look at it in a proactive manner.
Yes.
And for this whole fog thing, I think two things can be done from the point of view of DGCA. One, they should ensure that all the rules, as explained by the pilots here, should be adhered to. That is one. Second, for the 1 month or the 15-20 days where we have this possibility of fog, you must have a plan B in terms of what happens if fog were to descend right now.
Yes.
So that planning in terms of rostering also can be worked out if they were to work with the airlines. And third, most importantly, I think, is how do they ensure that the airlines also reach out to passengers well in time and make them aware of the possibility of a disruption. I think that is how we can tackle this. And when it comes to the Delhi airport particularly, I also want to make one point here, that one of Delhi's main runway 28 ton is out for repairs. I think and I think it started in the month of October.
Right, and there's a crane obstructing the runway.
Correct. So I'm just trying to think out loud here. Is that could we have avoided or postponed it by 3 months?
Yes.
Then we would have one more runway active
when the fog was going to hit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that 2810 airport, 2810 runway is like Cat 3 compliant.
Right.
And that is out of service at the moment.
Yes. So that, Captain Kishore, this point that Ajit just mentioned, the fact that one very critical Cat 3 compliant runway was out of action, it was undergoing upgradation when in the middle of fog, when you knew it, you needed it the most, it's out of there. So how much is the government to blame for all of this?
Yes, having runway 28 operational, 2810 would have definitely made a lot of difference. So like I said, let's look at roles of each agency, Okay, airport authority could have ensured that we have more Cat 3B compliant runways.
Yes.
But having said that, yesterday there was a case where an aircraft AirAsia took off from Bangalore to Calcutta, and after holding had to eventually divert to Hyderabad.
Right.
Because they couldn't make it back to any of the diversions. So in the northern belt, starting from Delhi all the way to Guwahati, all the airports were below minimum.
Right.
So it's a peculiar situation. Now the role of the regulator, which is DGCA, they are the ones who approve the winter schedule. So when you're giving that approval for winter schedule, insist on 90% of the crew which are going to operate that schedule. If you're going to give approval for 15 flights in the morning duration between 0500 to 0700 in your winter schedule, ensure that 90% of the crew, which is mandatory requirement for those flights, is Cat 3B compliant.
Absolutely,
Do not give them approval unless they're going to be Cat 3B qualified.
Right.
At least you can ensure that when you're approving the schedule, you ensure that the crew is Cat 3B compliant.
Right.
The required for that. Augmented crew we can talk about, like Mr. Bhargav said, that is a variable which you cannot really put the ball in the airline's court.
Right.
Now, reduce terminal retail space.
Yes.
What can airport authority do? Reduce terminal retail space to create more space for passengers' comfort by giving more seating for passengers.
Right.
That is the airport operator requirement. Now, airlines requirement, other than ensuring that Cat 3B compliant crew are there, is when to board the passengers. Update delays to the passengers. Mandate airlines. Every 30 minutes, you have to update passengers about a delay.
Yes.
Whether it's a fog delay, weather delay, operational delay, keep them updated about. Only then can you sensitivize the situation with
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Captain Kishore. I'm afraid we're totally out of time here, but thanks for your thoughts, Mr. Bhargav, Captain Panisar, and Captain Kishore. And Ajit, the fact is that fog is every year. It's going to happen without any warning. It's just a matter of how we handle it. And from what's emerged out of this discussion, it's clearly a planning and a coordination issue and a buck passing issue as it emerges.